So Games Workshop looks like they're buffing Black Knights and Dark Shrouds, and Lionel Johnson going down in points as well. However, unfortunately, it looks like these weird index points might yet again just be a teaser of what is to come. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today I thought I'd take a quick video to talk through the Dark Angels points in Warhammer 40k for the new balanced Dataslate and Munitorum field manual. Codex Dark Angels has gone on sale with the Deathwing Assault box set, with proper individual release to follow shortly. At the moment we're in the weird situation of basically knowing the rules due to all the leaks and spoilers that are out there, but the final points costs are still in a place where we've been waiting for them for quite some time. And despite the fairly monumental amount of doom and gloom that the internet seems to have met the new codex with, how strong the army is in-game won't actually be determined in any way until we get the points cost for their units, and I can't help but think that a little bit of the doomed saying is pretty premature. I'm definitely not saying that I don't get where Dark Angels players are coming from. There are far more nerfs than buffs within the codex. It's just not really a lot of fun to have the miniatures get slightly less powerful rules. Whether it's Lionel Johnson not being quite as tough to kill, the Landspeed and Vengeance damage nerf, or Deathwing Knights having less power, it's not exactly a whole load of fun, though I still think that people might well change their tune if they get costed to an extent where they're still quite good. Deathwing Knights, for example, I think could still actually be very strong in game and still cost more than a standard Terminator squad, so they'd still be elite and really quite effective per the point. We're just waiting to see what Games Workshop will actually deliver for them. It definitely goes a bit beyond that though. I feel like they should have buffed the Unforgiven task force in some way, as it just flat out isn't very good at the moment, and having several datasheets removed from a codex is never really a good feeling, particularly when they only had like 19 to start with, I think, losing 3 and gaining 1 back with the Inner Circle companions. In the balanced data slate, that understandably had me really interested to see what the points cost for the Dark Angels would be. I figured it made sense that if they were doing a new Munitorum field manual, then they'd bother to put the new Dark Angels points cost in there. It just sort of makes sense with the codex out in the wild, and even if not everyone can access it yet as it hasn't gone on full sale, I feel like letting the points cost out of the bag a little bit early doesn't really hurt anyone. Unfortunately though, that doesn't seem to have been the way that Games Workshop have gone for this, and the points costs do appear to be the index points costs. As you can tell by a few of the datasheets, there's no one for the Inner Circle companions, and the removed units from the codex still have points costs here. Though I still think that there is quite a lot that we can actually learn from these points costs, particularly for things that didn't really change in terms of their datasheets for the codex. It does seem that Ravenwing Black Knights will genuinely be a force to be reckoned with, given that their points went down in this update, and they're unlikely to get put back up in the codex, seeing as their datasheet remained the same. I must admit it was a bit disappointing though. I was very keen to make a video talking through Dark Angels points costs, as I said in the full balanced data slate video that I just did, and it now seems that yet again Games Workshop have served us with another interim points cost set. We now have 2 points cost sets for the Dark Angels that are not quite right, between the ones in the Codex and the ones in this balanced data slate, so maybe not the most helpful for people who just want to know what their army will be worth, as it helps them get on with collecting and planning. Games Workshop's thinking with this usually tends to be with their big boxes is that they see those as early access, and then the codex only actually properly goes live when the codex comes out and is released individually. So with any erratas or digital updates or anything like that, that doesn't happen until the book is on full sale. We last saw that, I think, with the Astra Militarum launch box set, where there was a really long delay between the launch box coming out and the full codex release. I found that quite an annoying time, given that there were a few basic FAQs and things that the Guard Codex was missing, and not making it marry up with the old balanced data slate. Still though, as mentioned, I will talk through the points cost briefly, as I genuinely think that there are some lessons to be learned about what will happen next for the Dark Angels. First up, Lionel Johnson is listed at 350 points, the same as he was in the Codex I believe. Previously, as per the Munitorum field manual, he was 380. It seems that 350 was Games Workshop's idea of how he should be valued for his old profile with the -1 to wound and everything. And given that in the Codex he got significant nerfs, not having the -1 to wound anymore and not having as dangerous attacks with the sweep mode from fealty, my guess is that he'll cost significantly less than 350 points by the time we get his final points. I certainly think he'd need to as well. At 380 points he was basically never played competitively, or very mighty, but there's only so much that any one melee focus model can do. I think I'd probably be hoping for a points cost more like 300 or less, which I think is still respectable enough for a Primarch. Otherwise, for the units in the Codex, the Ravenwing units look like they've actually got some good boosts. They were the side of the army that was very rarely played in tournament armies or anything. And perhaps one of the single most interesting units from this teaser could be the Ravenwing Black Knights, which looked like they went down to 90 points as per this update from the 110 points that they were before. I would have said that they weren't very exciting at 110 points, though not entirely unplayable, but dropping down from 110 to 90 is really quite a massive buff, I think. They're really quite fast and really quite threatening and dangerous between that plasma and the power weapons that they have, plus they have some pretty interesting synergies with the Ravenwing command squad now. That one also listed here as having gone down significantly, all the way down to 110 from 130, though I feel like they did get significant buffs in the index. Getting the character keyword and getting the option to lead units is kind of big. They can make an enormous Ravenwing units for huge alpha strikes now. The Dark Shroud is listed as dropping down from 125 to 115, which I think isn't awful given that it does give some fairly good durability boosts. Can be an interesting enough unit to have in the middle of an army for the first turn or two, and just go off to be a nuisance disruption unit later. And the Land Speed of Vengeance dropped down to 140 points from 160. That one got a big nerf in the Codex though, going down from damage 3 on the overcharge profile down to damage 2, which makes it way less threatening. I feel like it would probably need to be more in the sort of 100 to 110 sort of points mark rather than 140 to be particularly interesting with that. I must admit I didn't really like the datasheet change for that one. I feel like they should have just left it as is. Overall though, I think there's a really good chance that the Ravenwing Black Knights retain the 30 point cost that they have in this update when the Codex points come out, and if so they look genuinely fearsome and could be a really big asset to the army. Otherwise, for the Deathwing units, it looks like the changes that they have listed here were to the Deathwing Command Squad and the Terminator Squad. No changes for Belial at 85 points, and I feel like he could afford to go down a little bit. He didn't really get any datasheet improvements in the Codex, and at 85 points, I feel like I'd usually rather have the free stratagems that the Terminator Captain provides rather than the precision things that Belial gets. It potentially looks like good news for the Deathwing Terminator datasheet though. That one's down to 190 points from 200. I think there's a pretty reasonable chance that that will stay the same when the Codex points come out, given that that datasheet wasn't really changed very much. Gaining the Ignores modifier version of Fury of the First and a Watcher in the Dark over the regular Terminators seems more than worth 5 points. I feel like if there were say 190 or 195, all would be pretty good for the Deathwing Terminator's unique datasheet. It's maybe a little bit sad to see the Deathwing Command Squad buff so much here. That's listed at 200 points or 400 points for 10. If these guys were still an option in the Codex and they cost that much, they would be phenomenally strong, I think. Basically all the advantages of a regular Deathwing Terminator squad, but extra OC, and most importantly, an apothecary to revive models. I feel like that would probably make them into the new strongest Terminator datasheet for the Dark Angels if they still persisted in the Codex. Kind of a shame that they were removed. Otherwise, the Deathwing Knights were listed with no changes here, maybe not too surprising given that the old profile had them as one of the most competitive Dark Angels units. In the Codex though, they got some fairly heavy datasheet nerfs, only being able to be fielded in a squad of 5, and their melee damage isn't as exciting. Dropping down from damage 3 to damage 2 on the maces was a big hit. I did a community vote as to how much you think the Deathwing Knights should cost in the future, and you guys said that around about 210 points might be fair enough given the big damage nerf that they got. Personally, I guess that they might be a little bit more pricey than that. I still think that they'd be pretty solid at say 220-ish. I wouldn't be debating that they're weaker damage than most Terminators, but their durability with the -1 damage baked in is pretty standout. Finally, for the more core Dark Angels characters, no points changes were listed in the Dataslate update. Azrael here is just by far the most standout choice at 105 points for his command point farming, invulnerable save and sustained hits. He's just all around great. If he remains at that cost in the upcoming Codex points, then he'll still be auto-include in my book. Doesn't look like Games Workshop have any plans to nerf him, judging by this update at least. Otherwise, Asmodai and Ezekiel are a bit more borderline, I think. It was nice that they gained the ability to join Blade Guard, which means that their melee buffs go a bit further. Though I feel like both of them are maybe just a bit mid and might be competing kind of strongly against things like the Lieutenant and the Chaplain for those sort of units if you just want focal damage buffs. I guess Asmodai did see some other improvements to his profile in the Codex at least. Incidentally, for those guys in the Index errata, it looks like they fixed the ability of them to join the Company Heroes, a unit that it doesn't look like they can join in the Codex along with Azrael for some reason. These guys extra especially shouldn't have been allowed to join the Company Heroes though, as the squad gets destroyed if it doesn't get attached to by a captain or a chapter master, so they couldn't have joined it without the squad basically destroying itself at the start of the game anyway, so something was kind of broken there. Finally, Lazarus I just think needs help. He's 70 points and is just not very outstanding for that kind of cost. Psychic defense is all well and good, but it just isn't relevant against a good set of 40k armies unless you absolutely know what opponent you're fighting, I just don't think he's a very all-comers pick at 70 points, and you'd be better off with one of the other characters that's just going to give a more reliable damage boost. For him to get picked, I feel like he'd have to be costed significantly under many of the other characters. Overall, it is just a little bit frustrating that Games Workshop didn't give us the Codex points in this update. I think it would have been very helpful. I would have let Dark Angels players plan ahead a little. It does broadly look like good news for them though. It seems that even before the Codex was released, Games Workshop was planning on giving them points cuts, so that should mean that if they could take further nerfs beyond that, then they should reduce their cost even further than the points cost that we've seen here, at least for the majority of units in the Codex that didn't really see any datasheet improvements. Let me know what you think though. I feel like the Black Knights look like they could be a genuinely scary unit. If they do indeed go down to 30 points, that could make the Ravenwing far more deadly. So I feel like I want to see some units like the Lion or the Landspeed of Vengeance drop significantly from where they are now if they want them to be good. In any case, let me know your thoughts. Feel free to check out the full Dataslate video that I've linked down in the video description. That's the one where I go through every faction's changes. I'll hopefully be following it up with a few more faction-focused videos. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. And I would just like to mention that the channel does have a Patreon page as well, which is how I can keep all these videos coming quite as regularly as I do. If you have been enjoying a lot, then channel patrons do get a few benefits, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways each month. If any of that sounds interesting to you, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.